Welcome to episode 2 of Interact With Us. Today we're going to be discussing foundational SEO. That's all the stuff that you do before you start thinking about things like keyword research and meta tags and content and link building and all the stuff that people usually attribute to SEO when they think about talking about SEO.
Nice. Look at this weather today, man. It's beautiful out here. But I think the first episode we shot was just under a month ago, and it was snow on the ground. And so now we've got a couple of days this past weekend breaking almost 70 degrees, and I'm starting to see little buds and flowers come up, so I can't wait. We have 4 very distinct seasons here in New York, and as I get older I tend to not like the cold one anymore, but all is good. So as we come in, we head back to the studio, just give our quick greet to the team. I hope everyone's been well. I just wanted to thank everyone for watching our first video last month. We had over 10,000 views, and the phones were ringing off the hook for a few days here. So we appreciate all the feedback, and we look forward to doing a lot more of these. So let's head into the studio here, and we'll continue. All right, so we're back to the studio for episode 2. I hope everyone's been doing well. So Anthony, today we're going to get into some of the basics of what we've dubbed foundational SEO. And a lot of people have never heard that term before, and we argue it's because we invented it, but obviously a lot of people that do SEO know about these tactics. So when you hear that term foundational SEO, it's sort of like the foundation of a house, right? The foundation of a building. So without it, you can go ahead and try and construct it, do whatever you're going to do, but without a strong foundation, it's not going to be very solid. In fact, anything you do afterwards without a solid foundation could mean the demise of the entire building, right? And so it's very similar in search. If these basics aren't taken care of, and then you go ahead and do a bunch of keyword placements, and you do a bunch of great content and link building, you're still going to be working backwards, and the house of cards can fall if these aren't in place, even if you've done an excellent job on those other components. So when I say foundational SEO, what are some things that come to mind for you?
So that would include things like website speed.
So speed, good. What else?
The security of the website.
Security. What else?
That would include things like technical files that need to be in place, like site maps and robots files.
Tech files. What about like mobile responsiveness? That's kind of an older one now. I think most people have caught on to that. But
SSL.
Right. Well, making sure the site-wide SSL certificate is there. It used to just be for secure forms or e-commerce purchases. Now Google's really taken a big push for doing SSL site-wide. In fact, something like 70% of search results have SSL certificates now, and by the end of this year they're projecting 80 to 85%. So if you're not even just doing that one thing, which used to be, a $50 or $60 purchase, now there's even some free versions of SSL certificates available. If you're not technical enough to handle it, you can just call your webmaster. Probably for $20 or $30 they can have the thing installed in less than a day. Just little things like that. Right. So when we talk about foundational, that means these things should be done first, right? So if you're already engaging in an SEO program, or you have an agency working for you, and they've not handled some of these components, it's going to be a problem. I'll just give quick examples. So speed, right? We're going to show an example today of how to test it. And the tool we're going to be using, there's a couple of tools. One of them is actually put out by Google, and for the purpose of you testing the speed and making improvements to the speed of your site. If your site, let's say, took 60 seconds to load, or even 20 seconds to load, it's way too long. We're looking for load times between 2 and 5 seconds, maybe 6 or 7 if it's coming on mobile, right? Anything longer than that, and it could impact your rank. It's actually in the algorithm. It's actually in the original patent for their algorithm in 2004, but through the years, Google has reinforced the fact that speed is part of it. What about this one thing up here we didn't even talk about, which is uptime, right? Is it 99%? Are you buying a hosting service and they promise you 99% uptime? Well, if you just take the number of days in a year and multiply them by 0.99, you're going to find pretty quickly that that's like 6 to 8 days of downtime. Now, it might not be straight downtime where you're going into a panic and you have a whole week, but let's say it was 2 hours every Friday night because they were doing web maintenance and your hosting company can't keep the site live. What if Google is crawling the site at that time and it finds all page not found errors or server errors while you're sleeping? You wouldn't even know it, but how many times do you do a search, Anthony, and like the first few items you click on, they go to a 404 not found? Like it almost never happens, right? And that's because when the site is found to be down, even if it were ranking traditionally for certain keywords in a position, Google will penalize it temporarily until it can recrawl and see that the site is back up. And it can take a couple of recrawl cycles to get back to the position that it was at. And so if you're not aware, like we'll talk today about monitoring. There's free tools that you can use to get a text if that goes down. And then we'll also talk about decisioning and how we'll make some comparisons to how you make purchase decisions with the rest of your business needs as to how a lot of companies make purchase decisions around hosting, going for free or $2 or $3 a month hosting just because they think it's commodity, and it's really not. I mean, if you're getting even one customer a year from your website, you ought to be on a solution that is giving at least 3.9 uptime, 99.9%, or in some cases 99.99% uptime. The difference in spend on that might be, $15 or $20 a month. And so for $200 or $300 a year, you can have that peace of mind, and then you can monitor it around the clock. Another example is if you're doing Google ads or Facebook ads. A lot of companies, small businesses too, are doing this these days, and they're buying traffic around the clock. Well, what if it's the middle of the day, Sunday, and you're off at the football game, and that website goes down for 4 hours? Your ads are still running. It takes a little bit of time before Google realizes that the site's broken. You're paying for clicks into a black hole, and you're spending money and wasting it. Sometimes spending hundreds of dollars sometimes in a month without realizing that there's even no site there to go to, right? So this is really critical, not just from your organic search, but understanding, what is the cost of that website going down for a day or 2 days or 3 days? And even if you're not doing e-commerce, even if you're just a service business, let's say, a plumber or something like that, how many deals a year are you willing to miss because you got to spend $3 a month instead of $20 a month or something like that, right? So we're going to go through components today. For each of these, I'm going to show some examples. And in fact, this might be a breakout into 2 or 3 videos here, because I really want to focus on this foundational element before we even get into any of the traditional search optimization. So without further ado, I'm going to cut over to the screencast now in 5, 4.
All right, welcome to the screencast portion. Hey guys, thanks everyone for joining today. And so today I'm going to focus on just those first 2 elements that we discussed. So I'm here with my Google search up, and the first item on the list over there was uptime, and that's what we're going to take a look at. So how would you know if your site was down right now? You could go check in your browser, right? What if you could have somebody or an automated process checking every 5 minutes around the clock and then alerting you via text message, a phone call, etc. So let's just get into that. We talked about the reasons why uptime is important, right? From an organic perspective, the search engines, crawling your site, if they find it down at various times when they're crawling and looking for new page content, etc., it's not going to be able to rank very highly. The more often that the site is down during those crawl cycles, we talked about building trust and authority. You're not going to be able to achieve high rankings, even if you've done good keyword placement, even if you've got great content. The uptime is critically important to the site getting crawled. So let's just take a look at a couple of tools here. You could go into Google and you could just type website monitoring tools or monitoring service.
There's hundreds of different ones to pick from. I'm going to share with you 3 today that we've used over time. Then there's various levels, ranging from free to paid services. Okay, so you're just getting into this and you just want something that's going to do a basic check and alert you, right? So UptimeRobot.com. This is one that we've used. You can start monitoring in 30 seconds. You just click the button, punch in your website address and your email, and this thing will check. And what you're going to find with these tools is there's varying levels of testing, and then there's various levels of notification and escalation. So that's what we'll talk about. If you're a sole proprietor or a small business and you just want the basics, you could use a tool like Uptime Robot, punch in your email address and get notified. Another good thing to know is that there's email to text translations usually built right into your mobile platform. For example, I'm on Verizon, and if you just emailed my 10-digit number, so the full 10-digit phone number, at vtext.com, that's a service that Verizon offers. It'll convert that email to text. And so now I can put that in as my email address and get text messages when my website goes down. Because you never know where you're going to be, and you're not really checking email 24/7, especially on the weekends and stuff. So that's a simple component of, again, they have most of these services will have higher and higher levels of ranking. So let's talk about that for a little bit. If you're just testing every 30 minutes, let's say, from a single location, it may not report internet latency or the fact that there's some internet backbone issues between the person's browser and your web server. So what do I mean by that? I mean, here in New York, if I'm hitting a local company's website, it might be up and running fine, but somebody from New Jersey might not be able to reach it because their internet service provider has a local outage. Right. And so if large portions of the internet go down, which they sometimes do under denial of service or other issues like that, you still want to know. But how would you know that? The way you would know it is you start monitoring from multiple locations. So as you move upstream with most of these tools, the different types of packages that they'll have will include how many stations are monitoring your website. And so when we look at this next one, Website Pulse, this is another one we've used for quite some time. Again, starts free with basic monitoring. But now if you want to decrease that interval from 30 to 15 minutes to every 5 minutes, and if you want to increase those monitoring stations to say, all right, monitor me from 12 different stations around the globe every 5 minutes at each of those stations. Now you can start to break out and get a really good view. So the more important your site is, the more you want to be able to use those tools. And now you'll get into like $5, $10, $20 a month for those types of programs. Let's say that you're a slightly larger company and you're the owner and you don't want to be bugged on the weekends, right? You have people for that, right? So if you have IT staff or any kind of on-call or remote staff, these tools can be set up. And the reason I like Website Pulse and the next one, Inturis, which is one that we currently use, is that they have escalation procedures. So you can say, as soon as you discover an outage from one of those polling locations, let's go ahead and send an email to John, the IT guy. And if after 15 or 30 minutes the site is still down, then let's escalate to the VP of operations for your firm. And if it's an hour or more, then you get the email and text. So you can sort of do these increasing escalations, bring more people onto it. If it's an e-commerce site that does, let's say, $10,000 in sales a day, it's going to certainly be worth having that staff on call, paying for those resources to get in there and make sure the site comes up as quickly as possible. And even if it's a services business, you never know when that next lead would come in. So for us, 85, 90% of the day, there may not even be people browsing or clicking on the site. But when somebody is there, that represents a potential monthly retainer for us on our marketing services side, and missing that one customer could be a minimum of $15,000 or $20,000 a year of services that we'll never get to sell because the site was down, right? And so think about the real worth of that uptime, and is it worth getting maybe better hosting, but also monitoring and having that peace of mind that the site is up and doing its job as a sales maker and an order taker for your business, and that it really needs to be up as much as possible, right? The last one I'll show you is Anturis. This one has a little bit more. You know, they have server monitoring, network monitoring. It's also cloud-based from multiple locations. It's got seamless agent monitoring. And what I really like about this one is it has multiple types of tests. So we're doing stuff like if the website is down, we're trying to determine, is it the web server itself? Is it the database server that's serving up the content management system? Because sometimes Apache, like your web server, can be live, but the database for WordPress or Drupal might go down, and it will display different types of errors depending on the types of error messages or HTTP codes that come back. We can create different types of messaging, and they can route to different people, and they can also escalate. So, for example, you know, we host over 200 websites for clients. This tool's checking constantly for those clients. It's notifying IT staff. I'm being brought into the loop after 30 or 45 minutes on any outage, and therefore people are coming into the mix to help do triage and work out that problem. And what we find is, because we're doing a lot of the other things right, like doing bulletproof hosting, high availability, you know, regular virus scanning and security, some of the things we'll get into in the later foundational videos, the sites really don't go down that often. So maybe it's 3 or 4 weekends a year, something will happen on a site and we'll have to come in and look at it. Like we had one recently, and the hosting provider that the client was using was running out of disk space on the server, and that's a no-no, right? It's like they couldn't post any new content to the site. The site was sluggish. Like when a computer runs low on disk space, it sometimes can become sluggish because it relies on disk space for a thing called swap memory. So if it's running out of RAM, it'll sometimes use some disk space for temporary storage and memory. And if you're pushing into the 90s on disk usage on any computer, it's going to really slow the thing down and cause latency. And so the tool here can report if the site takes more than a certain amount of time to load, even though it's not down. We can also see that. And again, that triage or self-identification of whether it's the website, whether it's the database, whether it's a file system issue, a hardware issue like a CPU fan or something like that. So the more you get into the depth of monitoring, you can monitor many aspects, not just up or down, but all of those other components and lag time and hardware issues. So those are kind of like the good, better, best, like triage of services. We use all three, you know, depending on the type of client. We do charge $50 extra for clients in their monthly service in order to sub-license some of these from us. But that also includes our team reacting and responding to them around the clock on a 24/7 basis. And we typically only host for clients that are doing marketing services with us and bundle all of this together. We're not a hosting company per se, but we do provide that level of 24/7 support and peace of mind. So that's your uptime piece. And the next thing I'll show you here today is speed, and then we'll stop for the day. We're going to do other videos on the foundational elements. So you got your site up and running, you're on a good host, you're monitoring the uptime, things are looking good, but it's still ridiculously slow, let's say. This tool that I'll show you, and if you go to Google here and just look up Google Website Speed Test, you can bring that up in your browser. It's the Page Speed Insights. Google partnered with a third-party company to produce this tool, probably 4 or 5 years ago when it's been available. If you want the full URL, you can see it here, just developers.google.com/speed/page-speed/insights. I just find it easier to do the Google search, or you could bookmark that page. We're currently working on a new site for our sister company, Slingshot SEO. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one as the example today because I actually need to speed optimize that site for a relaunch that we're doing. So you punch in your URL, or you could copy and paste it, click analyze, and then you just wait. The tool's doing its job. What it's looking at here is a whole series of things. So it's measuring with a meter how long it takes Google's server to load that page. And then it's giving us a whole bunch of data and information about the site. Like, what are the things that could slow down a site? So is it server latency or internet connectivity? Could it be that it's the images you're using? You know, if you're using very large images, and it looks like Google failed on that. I'm going to just try it again here. Maybe it wants the www. Let's try that. Just double check that. Oops. I had the URL incorrect. All right, so we'll try that one more time. So it could be the images are very large. Like if you could take images with a fairly modern camera, it's going to come in there and, they're going to be, 4 megabytes, and you could possibly get a similar look and feel on the web, making that, 200K. So file size can have an issue, your JavaScript and how your code is using, whether you're caching certain elements. So some of this starts to get technical, but what I like about this tool is that all you got to do is plop it in, hit the button, and then whatever you don't understand, you can give to a webmaster or programmer. And these are the types of things where we excel all the time. So the site came back with an 87, which I got to tell you is pretty good off the bat here. We won't have a whole lot of work to do. It's falling in that 50 to 89 average. If it was 0 to 49, you've got some problems that probably need to adjust. If it's in the green, you're probably better than 90% of the people out there. The lab data will come back and it's going to show you each second down here in the load process. It's going to tell you certain key metrics, like when did it first do this first contentful paint. So that's the time at which the first text or image reached the browser. So that was 2.5 seconds before anything hit the browser. The speed index, and if you hover over the little information icons here, you'll see, how quickly were the contents of a page visibly populated. So we see we're in that 3.6 second range. Remember we said 2 to 5 seconds, so it's looking pretty good. And the time for that content to become fully interactive, meaning people can click on stuff and interact with the page. We look at the CPU idle times, which is, when the page's main thread is quiet enough to handle input. That's kind of a technical description. But it's, again, looking at, how quick did it hit the browser, where they can now start interacting, scrolling, clicking, etc. You'll notice when pages load really slow, you might not be able to scroll yet. The links might not be clickable yet. So that's what it's talking about when it's looking at those metrics, because they're still loading some code, even though there's stuff visible on the screen. So if you looked at it, this is a pretty good score. We have a little bit of thing to do, and this is going to tell you now how to get the best savings. So serve images in next-gen formats, right? So there's JPEG, PNG, there's GIF, there's a bunch of different images. And within JPEG, there's like 5 different types of JPEG, because JPEGs use what's called compression to render an image cleanly but reduce the file size to increase downloads. So what this is just suggesting is I could save probably 3.69 total seconds if I were to convert those images on the homepage of Slingshot SEO to one of these newer forms of JPEG or convert them to PNG. And that's the biggest time savings I can get. So if I did just that, our total load time could be maybe 3 or 4 seconds on this page. The next is eliminate render blocking resources. Again, you say, what's that? This is too technical. You can open the box and it tells you what that is. All right, there's some JavaScript and some style sheets. These are web programming languages and little pieces of code that come down. JavaScript is going to make some interactive things. So if you have a form, a button, any kind of rotator, that's usually run by JavaScript as an underlying language. And CSS is just the style sheets, and that's going to say what font size is the text supposed to be, what is the background color on a box that I put on the page. So it's all the styling component. So if you think about pure plain text like you would see in Notepad versus rendered text that's in a certain style, that would also be in the style sheet. So you can actually make some tweaks to that. There's a learn more link there if you want to get into it. And then it's listing all the different style sheets that I'm using in WordPress, all the jQuery and JavaScript stuff, and it's telling you item by item how much time you could save by tweaking or making modifications to that. A lot of times, you'll have inline code, and every page of the website has it. Let's say it's a menu or a rotator or some common element. If you move those to include statements, instead of rendering all the code in that header, the browser will load it once and then it'll be cached. So as they move around the site, it doesn't have to keep reloading that code, because when the browser sees the include statement and it already has a local copy of that script or style sheet, it can move a lot faster. So some of those things are components. Like just those two alone would save it. It's, properly sizing the images, minifying the CMS. This is another tool that'll take longer code and crunch out any unnecessary spaces, carriage returns, etc. Almost like compressing the style sheet code so that it can load faster, the same way you would compress like or zip a file. If you have a large spreadsheet or PowerPoint, you use something like WinZip. This does something similar with file compression and reduce the overall payload on the amount of stuff that has to come over the web to the browser. There's a bunch of other little stuff in here, but again, I recommend you just go top down with this, because 90% of the savings are going to be in 2 or 3 items here. So hopefully that'll give you an idea on how to use the Page Insights test. Go ahead and test your browser. One last thing here is we were looking at mobile results. If we switch to desktop results, you'll see that score went up to a 97. And because desktops tend to load faster, be higher bandwidth connections, we had that first contentful paint in 0.8 seconds. The speed index was 1.2, and we were green across the board. So most of the optimization that we would do on this page would be to support mobile devices. As we know from Google search tests, that represents about 50% of inbound traffic from search engines, probably more like 55 these days, is coming from mobile, right? And so that's where the bigger speed enhancements can be made. And for desktop, we're pretty good. Maybe we'll gain a few extra points with that if we make those optimizations as well. So that's just where I wanted to end today. I want to thank everybody for joining in, and we're going to continue with more foundational SEO elements in the next episode. So it's great to see everybody, and we'll catch you on the other side.